Giants and dragons. I can't move forward without tackling them. They are living forces of nature that will make a huge impact on the world around them. To design a good umbrella, we need to know what a rainstorm is. Giants and dragons both represent such a huge threat in the antediluvian world that every design decision its inhabitants make is made with them in mind. With Dead Gods, I don't just want to design giants and dragons, I also want to explore a possible connection between them. And just when you thought you knew what this project was, that connection has to do with aliens, psychedelic machine elves, and circus clowns. Buckle up. First, to the primary text, the Bible. Here are some excerpts from Genesis 6. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and that they took them wives of all which they chose. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same mighty men which were of old, men of renown. Now there are some very reasonable interpretations of these passages, perfectly normal, rational, and sane. But this is Dead Gods. Don't make me tap the sign. Watchers, demonic entities, descend to earth. They see earthly women and take them as wives. From them, giants are born, mighty men of renown, and they begin to wreak havoc. To start off, I'm going to assume that there was something about the world that was different before the flood that allowed for extreme size. Perhaps the atmosphere was more dense. Perhaps the negative effects of the sun were limited and the positive effects enhanced somehow. We don't need to get too specific about that yet. But looking at the actual fossil records of insects, for example, it's plain to see that something was in fact different enough to allow them to grow far bigger than their modern descendants. So I'm going to assume that whatever this state was, it will affect our giants and dragons as well. Years ago, I saw a design for a human giant. Following the logic of large land creatures like elephants, it made some very reasonable assumptions about how muscle and bone would be distributed to allow for this kind of scale. However, it was still accounting for our modern circumstances, our environment. In the antediluvian world, I'm imagining that we can plausibly get away with much more heroic, classical proportions at this scale. I do still want to account for the scale with an overall sturdiness, but I think we'll end up with a spectrum of proportions as needed. I drew up a quick pair of normal-sized humans to use for scale as we move forward. For this big guy, I wanted to set him at the scale of King Og of Bashan. He comes into the Bible much later on. It's one of the Rephaim. It says that he had a bed that was 13.5 feet long, and that a wooden bed wouldn't support him. Some speculate that bed is referring to a sarcophagus, which is kind of cool. There are some extra biblical stories about Og that are also quite fascinating, some claiming that he was hundreds of feet tall, but others saying he was only twice the height of a man. So I'm going to play it safe for now and keep him at 13 feet. Later on, I think there will be some opportunities to have some real fun with proportions. Nephilim doesn't just have to mean really big person for this. This is a first pass at a lanky giant. Somewhat tame for now, but this sketch gave me some ideas for some future unsettling encounters. I thought I should throw a classic in here too. In the Bible, when Joshua and the spies first entered Canaan to scope out the land, they encountered the Anakim. And there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. Some of the Anakim escaped the Israelite conquest, fleeing particularly to Gath, future home of Goliath, and his brothers. So here's Goliath, relatively puny by giant standards at 9.9 feet. Addressing giants also gives me a chance to iterate on some of the characters we've met already. I think the shipwright should be impressively tall. He doesn't have giant blood in him, but I think that the combination of the discipline and hard work that he's done should be reflected in his stature. Over the centuries, it's like he's physically adapted to the work he's been given to do and the diligence with which he's done it. I'll be exploring this concept more as we go along, but it may open up the opportunity to treat some human designs more like creature designs. I also decided to pull the trigger on something I'd been debating. Some people felt that the hunter's design was too conservative compared to his more ostentatious acolytes. I still think it's the right direction, because his simplified attire implies his absolute focus on the hunt. However, I'm going to restore him to his rightful place as the god of the hunt by making him a Nephilim. Here he is at 12 feet, hunched. Truly terrifying. I also wanted to draw up a baseline pair of Nephilim, something I could use as a reference point for the average. As mentioned previously, I'll be going smaller, bigger, leaner, bulkier as the need and opportunity arises. I added some really quick clothing and accessories at this stage as well, really just to get a feel for them. I'll go through a more rigorous costume design process in future videos. A quick word on their overall design going forwards. The primary source doesn't say much about them beyond their size and evil behavior. To look for a visual design foothold, I've done more research into secondary sources. There's a really wild theory about Nephilim, clowns, and DMT hallucinogenic machine elves. It goes like this. The Nephilim are descended from both humans and demons, the Watchers. They lured people away from worshiping God, and when they weren't just eating people, they were teaching them ruinous secrets. When the floodwaters came, they physically died, but perhaps that wasn't the end of them. For thousands of years since, humans have been using hallucinogenics and communicating with mysterious entities. In modern times, they've been referred to as machine elves, tricksters, or jesters that lure people away from God, promising to pass on secret knowledge about the universe. Again from the Book of Enoch. And Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and made known to them the metals, and the art of working them, and bracelets, ornaments, the use of antimony, beautifying the eyelids, all kinds of costly stones, coloring tinctures. And there arose much godlessness, and they committed fornication, and they were led astray, and became corrupt in all their ways. Samjaza taught enchantments and root cuttings, Armoros, the resolving of enchantments. All over the world, and all through the centuries, there is a recurring visual motif that has arisen from the people that commune with these entities. Pale skin, red hair, blood-red noses or mouths, and high contrast patterns like spots, stripes, and checkerboards. There's reason to believe that our modern idea of clowns was a direct continuation of this ancient motif, which may factor into why we find them so unsettling. The Nephilim of dead gods will also have pale skin, red hair, will often have red around their mouths, and will regularly be seen adorned in high contrast materials and patterns. Now, let's get even more unhinged and connect this idea to dragons. The demonic trickster machine elves lure people away from God into their circus of delights, but they're not alone. Centuries ago, there were stories of people being taken by the fairy. A recurring story is that the fae folk can't reproduce like us, so they take people, sometimes even babies, for the sake of making hybrids, creating offspring. Fast forward to modern times, and we hear the same stories, only now with the word fairy replaced with alien. Abduction stories often come with the idea that the creatures are studying humans in an attempt to alter us or create hybrids. Just as the Nephilim may not have fully vanished in the flood, what if that was also the case with their demonic parents, the Watchers? For this first pass at a Watcher, I imagined a large-eyed, gray-skinned, uncanny humanoid, a creature fascinated with humans, seeking to create its own subverted versions of them. Now, how does this relate to dragons? Originally, I had started by trying to design dragons to be more classically draconic. First by adding more texture, like a crocodile, and giving it the classic red and gold smog colors. Then I tried going with something more sleek, with more graphic patterns. This high contrast color scheme, with a shock of red, reminded me of my Nephilim research. What if the Watchers weren't all human-shaped? What if there were other kinds of demonic creatures that sought to make their own kinds of hybrids? Here you can see a version of Quetzalcoatl, the South American feathered serpent god, drawn at the scale of a titanoboa. For the Aztecs, Quetzalcoatl was related to wind, Venus, the sun, merchants, arts, craft, knowledge, and learning, passing on secret knowledge to humans. He was also considered to be a creator deity, contributing to the creation of mankind. In the context of the biblical creation story, this sounds like exactly the way the arch-villain would run his own PR. We also have centuries worth of stories of Quetzalcoatl making appearances during hallucinogenic trips, teaching and guiding those who would dare to put themselves in his grip. So if we have watchers of various kinds making an assortment of Nephilim hybrids, what if some of the larger and more ferocious types of dragons weren't just animals? What if our idea of diabolical, clever dragons was based on hybrid creatures created specifically to destroy? In the Book of Enoch it said, "And they, the watchers, bare great giants, who consumed all the acquisitions of men. And when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind." This would mean that in the ecosystem of dead gods, you'd have natural humans and animals like raptors competing with unnatural hybrid giants and dragons. This was a lot of weird ground to cover in one video. I'm definitely going to have to devote a number of videos to each subject, from giants to dragons to the watchers, and even the idea of physical adaptation over the course of centuries. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching. If you like where Dead Gods is going, click all the usual buttons. If you'd like to help support this project, consider subscribing on Patreon. Special thanks to my Dragon Tier patrons, who get to vote on certain aspects of development and get their names in the videos. You could also pick up a copy of my previous visual story, Tellurian, or my personal art book, which is a collection of some of my favorite pieces from the last 20 years. Thanks again for joining me. I'm excited to see where it's going to go. I hope you are too. See you next time.